We were talking about teams, and we're talking about teaming, which is a new term, really, for a lot of folks. They may not know what that means. And we're talking about it now in the context of culture. There is something that we are familiar with, though, when we talk about culture clash. It's actually like a real term.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good if you're part of it, right?
No.
What is it? And what is it that you've discovered you could do to help organizations? Can it even be repaired? I don't know.
It can be repaired, absolutely. So culture clash, we're familiar with it in terms of someone moving to a new country, and we'll talk about, I felt a lot of culture clash because this was so foreign to me, it was so unfamiliar. And in teaming, it happens because sometimes teams you might have 3 organizations coming together on a project. Like say it's a big construction project, architectural project, something like that. It requires lots of different disciplines. And you could actually have a culture clash between the teams because those organizations are different, or maybe you have a sales team, an engineering team, a design team of some kind. So we're really talking about the culture of those specific teams or organizations literally clashing, meaning there's conflict, people aren't appreciating differences, they don't understand how to work together effectively. And for whatever reason in our societal culture, there's still a lot of feeling that difference is bad. And so we'll see that on teams, we'll see that among organizations, versus looking at it and saying, wow, isn't that interesting that this team or this person's really different? What can I learn from this? How can we start to see where we have some commonalities? How can we start to see our differences as perhaps benefits?
And I wonder if we can talk about this for a minute, because it's not just like cultures clashing. There are so many layers of this. I mean, it could be culture, subculture, one department, another department. It could be a merger, an acquisition, or it could be a team that simply reorganizes. I mean, I went through this in the phone company. And, when you take an organization that's used to working together and you say, wait a minute, now you're going to move over here, folks. You're going to have a different vice president, right? We don't even stop to think about the impact of that.
We really don't. And that it's not so much that it happens, it's how as we talked about before, it's how it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most people, there are always exceptions. And I think most people can handle most changes if they feel respected, they feel informed, they feel that the communication's been, I always say feel like you're over communicating, and you'll probably be where you need to be when there's change, because people don't hear it the first 3 times, or they don't, so many things happen because they're feeling distressed. And I think that gets overlooked. They're like, oh, it's work, people just have to deal with it. Well, they're human, so they're not going to just deal with it. They will feel distressed. They will feel upset. They will feel scared and threatened. And when we're human, when we do that, we are not as productive. We're not as calm. We're not as creative. And that's a lot of the reasons we have culture clash, why mergers don't work, why there can be, like you said, there can be 2 subcultures clashing within an organization.
Yeah.
Because we don't take into account the human element of it.
I want to ask you this question. Are you asked to come in after the clash has happened generally, or have you been asked to come in to say, can you help us with this organization over here that used to be part of this division? Now they're going to a totally different division, or, totally different, norms in the organization. How does this unfold, and what would you prefer? What would you recommend?
I'm usually called in after the clash has happened, right? Because organizations, many of them are still very reactive and in problem-solving mode, So wait. And then, I want to make one comment about that I think is so related to this, is this element of time. The leaders will say, well, we should focus on our culture, but we don't have time.
Oh, boy.
And I get that sometimes timing is important, and one time may be a little better than another time. Yeah, there are those nuances to it. And by and large, how can you not have time to focus on your culture, which is actually driving everything that you do? And so the same can come up with the concept you were just talking about, is how do organizations do this well? How do they start to understand that they actually need to plan? They need to be proactive in terms of actually planning change. And what usually happens is it's going to be someone on a leadership team that will say, we should plan this change, right? We should do something. we should have maybe an outside person come in and help us figure this out, who has a fresher perspective, who's not part of the system. And that may happen, or they may be a lone voice, and everyone says, we don't have time, we don't have money, we just got to get this done, people will figure it out. And I'm not sure why, but that mindset tends to persist in many places, and people, of course, don't really figure it out.
You know what it reminds me of, though, too, is that each of us have an opportunity to either have a preventative mindset or, how should I say it, a wellness mindset. And I used to have a boss that used to say to all of us, well, you could pay me now or pay me later. And I never really got that until fast forward to the world we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point, there will be a consequence for not paying attention to culture changing.
Absolutely. I mean, we see consequences already all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And, in people falling behind their competition, in the high levels of employee disengagement that there's so much to support that what a lot of organizations are doing doesn't work. And of course, there are shining star organizations out there. I think of it as the humanity of how you work with people. Oh. And that's not going to be necessarily motivating to some organizations. But there is this aspect, how are we going to treat people? How do we want to be as people in organizations? And realizing that when we do that really well, we actually make more money. We actually will make more money. It becomes a win-win. It's not let's treat people well and lose money. It's treat people well, have a great culture. Whatever in your culture is unique and specific to your organization. It's authentic to your organization. So it's never about forcing an organization to be a specific culture. It's just like a family. Families are unique in their cultures. And so are organizations. So letting that organization have its culture emerge in a really authentic way that supports everybody is actually the best way to go in the end.